Hello and welcome to today's episode of the EFL Transfer Zone on Football League World TV. I'm your host, Marcus Ali, for today. Joining me is my Football League World colleague, Adam Jones. But just before we check in with Adam, I'm going to drop a quick plug. If you would subscribe to the channel, that would be very much appreciated. And do not hesitate to get involved in the comments section so I can throw some of your thoughts for Adam's consideration. But without further ado, Adam, it's been a long weekend. How are you feeling?
Yeah, not bad, thanks. This feels kind of weird having you as host. You're usually kind of beside me, right there beside me as a fellow analyzer. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into this. There's going to be yeah, there's quite a few decent rumours here, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see if some of these materialise.
Yeah, a lot of stories coming out on this Monday morning, so it's so good to be sort of checking in on them this afternoon. So let's get into today's show. So top of the agenda this afternoon is Hamza Choudhury and a potential loan move to West Bromwich Albion next season. Obviously, very below par season for the Baggies in 2021-22. And Choudhury's been a fringe player at Leicester for the last few seasons after playing quite a lot for the England youth ranks. What did you make of this one when it first came out?
Yeah, I think it just sums up really kind of the freshness that Steve Bruce wants. I think having a fresh voice in the middle of the park will do them, very well. I think he starts. I think in place of Jake Livermore. I think there comes a point now where I think it's probably right if Livermore and West Brom perhaps severed ties. I think perhaps as Steve Bruce keeps on alluding to, there needs to be a sense of freshness in there, and I think he can, really work well in that kind of 4-2-3-1 formation. I think alongside someone like Alex Mowat, perhaps giving Mowat the license to get forward a little bit more, having John Swift there as well as the advanced midfielder. Obviously, Mowat and Swift can kind of interchange a little bit and kind of who stays deep and who goes forward a little bit. But I think Chowdhury's kind of the man that kind of balances it all out and kind of providing that kind of layer of protection in front of the defence, which I don't think their defence was hugely bad last season. Obviously, their record was reasonably decent. But just having that kind of balance in the midfield, I think, is going to be crucial to their success, really. And obviously, they're starting to target other goal scorers as well. And I think that's been their main problem. But now that they are targeting those goal scorers like Swift and Rothwell as well, obviously, Swift's already over the line. Who else? Jeb Wallace is another target who can contribute going forward. Tom Lawrence, very similar as well. So now they're starting to focus on getting more goals into their team as well as DK coming back as well, who will contribute. I think it's a good time for them to also have a little bit of a focus on the defence as well to make sure that they're not kind of resting on their laurels. So yeah, I think this would be an ideal addition.
Yeah, definitely add a point of difference to their midfield. I think a player of Chowdhury's profile. He's got just 1 year left on his contract at Leicester City. 24 years old now, which had crept up on me a little bit. Do you think, even though West Brom clearly have ambitions to push on for promotion next season, you mentioned that you do think that he would start, but there would be competition for places for sure. Do you think maybe with where he's at in his career, he should possibly take a move to possibly a lower championship club where there would potentially be more guarantees that he'd be first choice week in, week out?
Yeah, I think at this stage of his career, I think he's got to be starting. I still thought he was 19 or 20, to be honest with you. Yeah, had the same kind of feeling as you then when you said he was 24. Yeah, I think he needs to be starting kind of week in, week out now. I think he's come to that sort of age where he needs to be. Otherwise, he won't fulfil his potential. It's similar really to Nathan Broadhead, who we're going to go on to kind of later on in the show. I think he does need to be a regular starter now. Whether he does that on loan or permanently, I don't think it really matters at this stage as long as he's getting some first team football under his belt. I think that's the most important thing, really. And I'm not sure that Albion will be able to afford a permanent kind of fee for him at the moment. Obviously, splashing out like £7 million on DK in January, I think having a loan deal was probably the most ideal kind of option for them. But I think maybe Leicester will want to kind of give him a 1 year kind of extension before he does go out on loan to West Brom. So that might be a potential barrier in terms of if Choudhury doesn't want to sign a new deal, he might not be able to kind of be let out on loan. Perhaps that Leicester won't sanction a loan. But if he does sign a new contract, I can easily see him ending up at the Hawthorns. I know that Steve Bruce has wanted him for quite a while now, so I think this will be a good addition for them.
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely going to be an exciting one to monitor. I think we haven't really seen Choudhury in the EFL since his sort of rise to prominence in the Premier League. So, yeah, I think a Championship promotion push inside definitely seems like a good fit. Next up, we're going to be checking in with one of the Championship's new boys. So on to Sunderland now and their quest to bring in a goalkeeper potentially. Seeing them linked with John Ruddy, who's a free agent after his release from Wolverhampton Wanderers this summer. Obviously, very experienced goalkeeper, 35 years old, and actually a one-time England international, which had certainly passed me by. What did you make of this link when you saw it first, Adam?
I think this is the type of player that they need. I think obviously Anthony Patterson's only 22, and that's still reasonably young for a goalkeeper. But there's a part of me that think that he's kind of earned his chance really to shine in the Championship after being reasonably solid at times for the Black Cats. So I think having someone who's experienced who can come in just in case that Patterson doesn't adapt well to the Championship is probably ideal. But they do need someone who will be happy kind of remaining behind Patterson in the pecking order, and in terms of the type of player that will be needed, if they are to be happy behind Patterson, I think you need kind of an older head in there. I think who's kind of more perhaps focused on coaching and that sort of thing. I think that Ruddy can really fill that mold quite well. Perhaps like even like a Scott Carson as well, or a Frank Fielding. Just having that type of player in there who can come in, who have been there, done that, can prove to be a reliable option in the second tier. I think is going to be I think it's an ideal kind of addition for them. Obviously, he hasn't played too much football, which is going to be a bit of a concern. I think obviously we saw that with David Marshall kind of going to QPR mid-season, during the last campaign and struggled a little bit at times. Perhaps that's a little bit of a concern if he was to come in. But yeah, I think he's kind of the type of player that they need to come in, and it's also you've got to consider the fact that you don't want to be blocking Jack McIntyre's kind of route to the first team either. So I think having a short term addition there as kind of your second choice, I think would be ideal. And obviously, I think that Alex Neil has worked with Ruddy before at Norwich, so I think it's a good fit really. To be honest with you, obviously Ruddy's played on a big stage before, so he'll cope with the Stadium of Light reasonably well. And yeah, I think this would be a good signing for them, especially on a free transfer as well, when they've got so many other areas to look at as well in terms of especially their strikers. With they can't be relying on Ross Stewart, and they've got to fill gaps in terms of some of their loanees going back to their parent club. So I think this would be an ideal signing.
Yeah, just picking up on the fact that he is available on a free transfer. Obviously, we've seen clubs maybe try to act a little bit more shrewdly and free transfers almost be a little bit more enticing than they were before the pandemic because of the financial impact. If Ruddy wasn't to go to Sunderland at 35 with the experience he's got, would you see him as a good option for most Championship clubs? Do you think that's where his next move should be over the course of the summer?
Yeah, I mean, I think most clubs in the Championship are hamstrung really by the financial kind of effects of the COVID pandemic, and also needing to abide by the EFL financial rules. So I think for me, he would be an ideal addition, I think, for most Championship sides. I'm not sure if he'd come in straight away as a first choice option. Obviously, I'll go back to the example of David Marshall at QPR. I think it'd be probably be better if he's kind of eased in nicely and then kind of called up if a first choice keeper is unavailable. So I don't think I'd bring him in as a first choice, but I'd definitely have a look at him as kind of someone who can be a backup and maybe even go into coaching, maybe post his playing career, because he's obviously got a wealth of experience. Obviously that one international cap, but he's got a decent amount of domestic experience behind him, and they would probably be a good coach. So I think for me he'd be a good short term addition for most Championship sides, as you say.
Yeah, definitely a lot. I think that John Ruddy could contribute on and off the pitch at this stage of his career. Next up, we're going to be talking about one of the up and coming stars of the EFL. So, reportedly, all three promoted clubs from the Championship this season, Fulham, Bournemouth, and Nottingham Forest, are interested in pursuing Callum Styles of Barnsley this summer. A player we've seen play in a variety of positions and have a lot of success with the Tykes, despite a very difficult 2021-22 season. Of course, with Barnsley ended up finishing rock bottom of the Championship. Do you think he's ready for the step up to the Premier League, though, Adam?
Well, I look at his stats is 3 goals and 1 assist in 43 league games, and I'm thinking, is that output really good enough really to make the step up to the Premier League? Perhaps as a wing back maybe, but even then, you've got to cope with some of the Premier League's best attackers. So for me, I think it would perhaps make sense for him to ply his trade maybe at a top end Championship side, maybe with one more season under his belt. I think to give him that added layer of kind of experience and kind of provide that security as well, for the team who want to kind of go up, and then the team that are in the Championship that want to go up can then be reassured if he performs well in the Championship that he can. For another season, that he can do a job in the Premier League. But I think for me, a top end Championship side would probably be the better move at this stage. I think there's always a possibility that he could become like Ben Brereton Diaz and have a really good summer with Hungary and gain a lot of confidence from that and take his game to another level. There's always a possibility that that can happen. So it probably wouldn't be the worst punt really for a lower end Premier League side, but at the moment I'd kind of class him as a top end Championship player that can kind of perhaps use next season to build confidence, and then if he does well, then I think he can fully kind of say that he's earned his move up to the top tier. But I think him playing for Hungary is an important factor for him. It will definitely raise his profile. It'll give him more confidence. Obviously, he's playing with some very good players as well. So I think I think he'll definitely be ready for the Premier League at some point. But whether he's ready now, I'm not 100% sure. Obviously, we've got to bear in mind the fact that he's played for a team that really struggled going forward last season. I mean, really struggled going forward. Their defence wasn't even too bad, to be honest with you. It was just going forward, which wasn't good enough, really. So we've got to take that into account as well. And obviously, he's played in a lot of positions as well. He's had to adapt to certain areas, which is probably quite unsettling, and obviously hasn't helped his goal scoring record. But I think having one settled season, one more settled season really in the Championship would be ideal for him at this stage. Even with his versatility, his versatility could be a great asset to most sides really in the EFL and perhaps even higher than that.
Yeah, I think playing time's got to be at the forefront of his mind with his next move. Obviously, potentially, if he wasn't ready to start in the Premier League, there would maybe be an option to loan him into the Championship. But say he does get this Premier League move this summer to one of the three promoted clubs, what do you think would be the best fit at this stage of his career? Forest, Fulham, or Bournemouth?
This is a really difficult one because obviously we've got Fulham that have got Seri obviously going and Guisa's obviously gone already. So they're kind of perhaps wanting perhaps one or two more options in that midfield, but perhaps they want a starter really instead of instead of a fringe player because they need to kind of level up their squad really. So I'm thinking of that. Obviously they've got Robinson and Brian in that left back spot. I'm not sure that he'd really kind of climbed to first choice at the moment. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm not really convinced. I think Robinson will start in the Premier League, so I'm not really sure about that. Even kind of playing him higher up, with the likes of Harry Wilson and Cabano, I just think his output at the moment, as I mentioned earlier, with the 3 goals and the 1 assist last season in the league, I just don't think he's got enough just yet to kind of contribute enough going forward. So I think Fulham is probably a no go. I think obviously Bournemouth have got quite a few options in the midfield. We've got likes of Philip Billing, Lewis Cook, and Jefferson Lerma, who probably kind of start kind of ahead of him at the moment. And if you look to that, left back area again, you've got Jordan Samura there. And for me, I think he'd perhaps benefit from having a competitor like a more established, perhaps Premier League option in there. I'm not sure about Danny Rose, but like someone in that sort of profile to kind of that already has a decent amount of top tier experience under his belt to kind of come in and be that reliable option if Zamora was ruled out. So I'm not sure about kind of Bournemouth. I think perhaps Forest will be the best destination for him, especially if they say that if they offload Jack Colback, who can do an option, who can do a job in the midfield and at left wing back. I think that he'd be perhaps a solid replacement, and but I think he's not too old either, is he, Callum Styles? So he'll only get better really with more experience under his belt. Obviously, as an international player, if he gets more international experience under his belt, that can only be a good thing as well. So I think perhaps Forest maybe if they're looking for more depth, because obviously they're in need definitely of more depth in those two areas. Definitely the midfield position with James Garner going and obviously, Cafu's future is perhaps uncertain at the moment as well. And obviously at left wing back, Max Lowe's gone back to Sheffield United. So I think having him there perhaps as a bench option maybe for Forest will be the best option at the moment.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Who wouldn't want to play under Steve Cooper at the moment? Next up, we're going to be talking Wigan Athletic. So Wigan are reportedly in for a loan move for Nathan Broadhead, the Everton striker, 24 years old, of course, better known for spending last season on loan at Sunderland, was in and out the side with injury, but did make some very decisive contributions and aided the attacking contingent alongside Ross Stewart. Do you think this would be an exciting signing for the Latics?
Definitely, I think I've said this before on the website. I think his goals to game ratio can't really be questioned with 10 in 20 in League One in the regular season. Obviously, as you mentioned, he struggled with injuries, which must be a real source of frustration for him. But I think he definitely provided a lot of kind of attacking firepower in the Championship. I think along with the likes of Will Keane and Callum Lang, I think that they'd all kind of provide the firepower needed to give the Latics the best chance of remaining in the Championship. And I think having one more option kind of in that attacking area would be ideal for them, just kind of going forward, really, to kind of perhaps compensate for any kind of for a poor defensive record, perhaps going back. I think that it'd be it's really important that they have enough goal scoring firepower. Obviously, we talked about Barnsley in the last segment and not having anywhere near enough kind of attacking firepower following their departure of Daryl DK. So really having that kind of those forward options available to you and having depth, having competition in there is going to be very important, I think. So I think this would be a decent addition for them. And he may not be the most experienced in the Championship, but he's made a good impression at Sunderland, and I can see him doing the same definitely at the DW Stadium.
Back to the player development side of things then. Broadhead's 24 now, only 1 year left on his contract at Everton. Should he be looking for a permanent move this summer? Obviously, with Everton staying in the Premier League, his first team prospects look a little more blocked than maybe they would have been had the Toffees fallen to the Championship. Seems unlikely that at that age and given his chances of making it in the first team, that a new deal possibly might not come. So would a loan almost be a little bit counterproductive in the final year of his contract? Should he be looking to tie down his long-term future somewhere else?
Yeah, I would if I was him. I know that to be honest with you, I don't think Everton are completely out of the woods yet in terms of relegation, perhaps over the coming seasons, especially with kind of the off-field situation. But for me, I think he's got to kind of make the move. He can't rely on Everton being relegated now. He's got to make the move somewhere else. I think he's never going to get in the starting lineup at the moment at Goodison Park, and he needs as much first team football under his belt as possible. And at 24, you'd ideally want a long term kind of home, really. So I would definitely be looking to seek a move away. You look at the likes of perhaps Lewis Baker, who was obviously at Chelsea for quite a long time before he secured his move to Stoke City. And I think for me, he kind of missed the boat really in terms of fulfilling his potential. He's still a great asset to have, Lewis Baker, obviously with his goal scoring prowess, but I think he could have been an even better player if he'd left Chelsea a lot earlier. Obviously, having to relocate everywhere to go out on loan, I think it'd be perhaps ideal. I think both personally and professionally for Broadhead if he was to make the permanent move away and kind of just settle down somewhere kind of for the long term. And I think that will only help him to thrive on the pitch as well, having a settled home to kind of be in and be in a kind of a settled location. So I'd definitely be looking for a kind of a more permanent move away, and he's definitely put himself in the shop window as well during the 2021-22 campaign. So I'd definitely be looking for a move away.
Yeah, Nathan Broadhead's immediate future. Definitely going to be an interesting one to monitor over the course of the summer window. We're going to be talking Stoke City next. So Josh Tymon has been linked with Rangers. A reported potential fee that Stoke would want for his services is £5 million. He's got 3 years left on his deal at the Bet365 Stadium. Obviously was one of the Potters' strongest players just last season and was given a longer term contract as a reward for that. What did you make of this rumour when it came out, Adam? That's quite a commanding transfer fee for Stoke to set for him.
Yeah, but I think they're entitled to kind of charge that amount. I think he's obviously been one of the first names on the team sheet, really, 43 league appearances last season. And I think they are, more than entitled really to ask for that sort of fee, knowing that his contract situation, his contract isn't up, next year or anything, so they can, maximise their price tag, and he's someone they'll want to keep as well. So there's no point really selling him on for cheap either. So yeah, if he does go, then I think Stoke will probably have the better end of the deal because I can't see them cashing in even for 5 million. I'm not sure if I can see them really kind of cashing in. Really, I know that they've become a lot more kind of financially stable and perhaps sensible off the pitch, but even that, I think he's one of the first names on the team sheet. Really familiar figure really in there, and I think that I can. I think the £5 million is completely kind of justified. So but I think this is a difficult kind of move to weigh up for Tymon himself. Obviously, there's the prospect of perhaps playing obviously Europa League football or conference football, or just European football in general. Really, obviously getting to the Europa League final last season could be a taster of kind of what's to come. Really, especially under like a legend really like Van Bronckhorst. I think is always going to be an attractive option really for him. So I can see him making the move, but I'd be slightly hesitant. I think you look at the case of Ryan Christie at Celtic kind of hitting his ceiling perhaps in the Scottish Premiership, and I think that the same could potentially happen for Tymon, and he could move back to England quite soon after. So no, I'd be hesitant to make the move at the moment. Most definitely, I think that Stoke off the pitch are definitely going in the right direction. I know that they've obviously had some underwhelming seasons on the pitch, but I think they're definitely with Michael O'Neill kind of at the club now. I think off the field they're heading in the right direction. I think the recruitment has been absolutely superb recently as well. So I think they're building towards the Premier League, and I'd be hesitant to leave now if I'm honest.
Okay, so Stoke heading into their 5th season since relegation from the Premier League in the Championship. Parachute payments are a thing of the past at the club now. Say Rangers, with the money that they accumulated, only a penalty shootout away from Champions League football, do meet that asking price of £5 million. Does Stoke accept? And where would that leave them if they did? Because, they're not in a financial situation where they're able to turn that kind of money down anymore, are they?
That's true. That's true. Obviously, with they had a huge amount of spending, didn't they? Really, in the summer of 2018, getting like Tom Ince, I think, for about £10 million, and obviously that, obviously the wages as well, kind of follow through perhaps for the following seasons and have that kind of knock on effect really in terms of their financial situation. So, you make a good point. When you look at Stoke's financial situation, just in terms of meeting financial fair play rules and that sort of thing. I think I would perhaps be tempted maybe to accept 5 million. Obviously, they're not in a position to turn down huge fees. Perhaps I think I'd push kind of Rangers as far as they can go, to be honest, and then kind of accept a fee. But yeah, it's a difficult one to weigh up really for Stoke. I think what I'd do with the money, I'd definitely bring in a replacement. Obviously, you've got Alfie Doughty, who could be perhaps a long term kind of replacement for Josh Tymon, but is his output good enough? We have that similar kind of debate with Styles. Is his output good enough yet to make the step up to Stoke's first team? I'm not 100% sure. The only goal I think that he scored for Cardiff was against Reading, and I think that was when they had made kind of a formation change and had 4 at the back and had Doughty on the wing. So, does he contribute enough going forward? I'm not 100% sure at the moment. Doughty, obviously, Tymon didn't, in terms of stats, didn't create a huge amount kind of going forward in terms of goals and assists, but it would be a massive miss, to be honest with you. So I'd definitely be looking to getting kind of a replacement kind of as my first priority, and then perhaps make some of the funds kind of available for free transfers to come in, because obviously there's still quite a few free agents there that could do a job for Stoke and that can provide value for money. So there's definitely a couple of things that they can do if they accept the 5 million, but I'd be looking to push Rangers as far as they can go.
Absolutely, yeah, certainly a conundrum for Stoke to consider this summer. And we're going to be moving on to a Derby County rumour next. So the Rams are reportedly interested in a deal for James Collins this summer. The 31-year-old spent last season, his debut season, at Cardiff City, mainly sort of on the fringes, and was even almost exiled by Steve Morrison, to be honest, towards the back end of the campaign. It does seem like both parties are pushing for an exit this summer. Do you think that Derby would be a good move for him at this stage? Obviously, he's performed well in League One before. What would you make of this signing?
Yeah, he'll find himself quite lonely at the moment, James Collins, because obviously, the amount of players that Derby County have got out of contract is ridiculous, really. Obviously, with their current situation, hopefully they can get some contracts over the line, as soon as possible. But I think in terms of Derby, I think it'll be a good move for him. Obviously, to a top end League One side, I think I'm not sure if I'd say that the step down is needed, but I think it will definitely give him that kind of confidence boost, kind of playing against a weaker opposition, kind of get himself kind of in and amongst the goals again. I think would give him a massive boost in his confidence. And I think that will kind of serve him well, perhaps, and give him some momentum kind of to go back into the Championship and be a decent asset there again. Obviously, he was a decent asset for Luton in the second tier when he was there. Obviously, before moving to Cardiff, where it kind of hasn't really worked out. But we've seen James Collins throughout the years as being prolific at the likes of Shrewsbury and Luton and Crawley as well. So I think for me, this will be a very good signing for Wayne Rooney with his goal scoring pedigree. And obviously, they're not going to have too many options, I don't think, in terms of squad depth. Obviously, Wayne Rooney's got to get quite a few players in. But I think they may miss out on a couple of targets. So they'll need, their strikers to be on top form, really, and kind of prolific. And I think that James Collins can be just that if he's given the confidence to do so. Obviously, as you said, towards the end of the season, he was kind of exiled, really. And the fact that they brought in Uche Ikpeazu and Jordan Hugo in January, and obviously recalled Max Waters as well. That wasn't exactly kind of a huge vote in confidence kind of in him. So I think for me, it'd be decent kind of confidence booster for him if he did make the move. And I think for Cardiff, kind of from their point of view, I think it'll be wise to kind of let him go for free if he's not in their plans, because that could make then kind of like a spot perhaps for another free agent to come into the Cardiff City Stadium. So I think for all parties, if he was offloaded for free, and Cardiff didn't have to pay kind of kind of a fee to kind of terminate his contract and just kind of send him on a free transfer to Derby, then I think it'll be a decent move for all parties.
Yeah, for me, this is a player that the majority of the top half of League One really should be interested in, given that he has been made available for transfer by the club. From the player's perspective, obviously, Derby, there's a lot of uncertainty off the pitch still. So should he be looking elsewhere? Or do you think that the pull of playing under someone like Wayne Rooney, particularly as a striker, would be enough for him to maybe prioritise Derby over other suitors?
Yeah, I thought that Ipswich Town was going to be a bit of a rebuild. To be honest, I thought that was a big rebuild, kind of building, kind of bringing in like 19 players or whatever it was last summer. But this is going to be kind of at a different level, really. And I think Wayne Rooney could create kind of quite an exciting project. I know that he's probably got plans in place already, kind of a vision of where he wants to go. And if he sells that vision well, then I think that James Collins will sign on the dotted line. I think he kind of understands the situation. I know that Chris Kirchner is very close now. I think to kind of sealing the takeover deal. For reports to be believed, really, and it's all but done, really. So I think that now that takeover is all but done, he should definitely be considering Derby as an option, and obviously to play in front of the crowd at Pride Park as well. And there's going to be no shortage of support as well. So I think this would be a good move for him. I definitely wouldn't turn down a move to Derby unless they're offering him a very, very low wage. But I think Alan Nixon said yesterday on his Twitter that Derby will be looking to offer reasonably kind of decent offers to players. So it wouldn't be a surprise to see this deal materialising at all.
Okay, definitely one to keep tabs on then in the coming weeks. We're going to move on to a more left field rumour next. So Huddersfield Town are apparently in advanced talks to sign Kyle Hudlin from Solihull Moors. The 21-year-old striker is actually the tallest professional footballer, outfield footballer, I should say, in Britain at 6 feet and 9 inches. He's a striker, scored 5 goals for Solihull Moors this season. Can obviously relate now, having lost in the National League playoff final, with the Terriers losing out to Nottingham Forest in the Championship playoff final. What did you make of this one, Adam? Obviously, we don't see players move from the National League to the Championship particularly often, but at just 21 years old, out of contract as well, I should add. He is under 23, so there would be a compensation payment involved, but potentially representing a bit of value in the market for Huddersfield.
Yeah, just it's worth taking a punt on him, to be honest with you. They did the same with Sorba Thomas, and he's become one of their most valuable assets really, and sticking to Sorba Thomas really, especially with his set piece deliveries. I think him and and Hudlin's height, I think would be an absolute dream really. I'm not sure he'd be a regular starter really. I think he'd probably perhaps start a couple of Carabao Cup games and FA Cup games. But I think he'll mainly be a bench option, and that's no real bad thing. If they take kind of a cheap punt on him, and if they don't offer him a huge wage, then I think it's worth just kind of having him on the bench really as an option. And if it doesn't work out, then it's a low risk gamble that's kind of gone wrong. But even saying a gamble, I don't think it really is, considering how low the fee they're likely to pay out for him, and how talented he is really. Seeing him in the playoff final, obviously against Grimsby, getting the goal, really showing his aerial prowess, really, and stepping up at important times. I think it's a really good sign, really, for the Terriers. So and you feel like Huddersfield need a bit more kind of going forward. Obviously, Danny Ward kind of stepped up to the plate very well last season, perhaps unexpectedly. But the likes of Jordan Rhodes and Josh Koroma, they didn't score the most goals. I think it was 4 and 3 kind of respectively in the league last season. So I think for me it'd be good for them if they had a bit more attacking firepower in there. Perhaps even perhaps they benefit perhaps from a more established championship option, maybe a more reliable championship option. If they can offload perhaps maybe Jordan Rhodes, I'm not sure if they'd want to do that. But if they can get in a championship perhaps option who will score the goals and Hudlin, I think that would be a real dream for them, to be honest with you. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with this one. I'd definitely back them to take a low gamble kind of punt on him.
Just to finish off on maybe a more of a broader question, a lot has been made of the strength of the National League in the last year or so. We've seen sides come up and do so well in League Two. How big of an influence do you think Sorba Thomas's performances and the way he stepped up from Boreham Wood, the National League, to the second tier with Huddersfield so well, will now hopefully be going to a World Cup with Wales as well? How big do you think his example, how big of an impact do you think that sort of has with clubs now potentially taking more and more gambles on players from the National League?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important, and Sorba Thomas has had a really amazing story. I think he worked in JD Sports, and has worked in kind of different areas as well, maybe even construction or something like that. So he's had like a typical kind of non-league kind of route really, and the fact that he has made it to a playoff final, got past Joe Worrell I think twice, with ease, has shown real quality. Obviously, as you mentioned, he's a Welsh international now. I think his impact is going to be enormous really on teams taking a lower punt really on kind of like a cheap punt really on some kind of lower league players. I do think the COVID pandemic has had a little bit of an impact kind of in terms of teams that are perhaps not expected to pay out huge fees now. Obviously, the signing of Harry Wilson in the Championship, I think it was 12 million, was raised a few eyebrows, and that just shows you really how much the Championship has changed kind of since the pandemic. Obviously, with teams being, as I mentioned earlier, kind of hamstrung really by EFL restrictions and that sort of thing. Obviously, with financial fair play, which I think is right. So yeah, I think Thomas has had a massive impact, and I think Hodlin will have a similar impact too, because I back him to be a reasonable success actually at the John Smith Stadium. I think, as I mentioned with Thomas's set pieces, I think it'll be a kind of a dream really for them. And at 21, Hodlin's only going to get better really and develop into a more accomplished footballer, and we'll be training with higher tier players as well. So I can see this move going well, and I think that those two definitely Huddersfield players will, well, perhaps imminent signing for Huddersfield and the existing Huddersfield player will have a massive impact really.
So that brings us to the end of the show, gone through those EFL transfer rumours. All that's left for me to say is thanks a lot for joining me, Adam. Really enjoyed your insight this afternoon. Thanks for watching. Please do drop a like on the video, and we'll see you next time.